Welcome to the Dwelling Beyond podcast with Brittany
and Satara.
This is our brand new podcast by The Dwelling Productions, where we sit down and talk about the crazy, beautiful community we have in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Yes, and we figured what better way to start it off and have our first guest. I mean, we had to have the Pastor Emily.
Of course.
Wow. We
got to add that.
Well, it's the dwelling, so it's got to be the pastor.
It's kind of like the Ohio State, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or like
the Wartburg Theological Seminary.
The Delta Sigma Theta,
The.
all that.
You become really official when you have a "the" in front of it. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So we have Pastor Emily as our first guest. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. Y'all are doing good stuff here.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Shout out to you for letting us get out and venture out and figure out what we're doing here.
That's right.
So, you just want to give a little intro about yourself?
Oh my gosh, yes. But what do you want to know? Like what feels important?
Well, right now, just, what do you do at the dwelling?
Well, I am the lead pastor at the dwelling, and most days that just feels like a rodeo. And I'm a cowgirl in the rodeo. I don't know. No, really though. So I'm lead pastor there, and I don't even know exactly what all my responsibilities are, other than just making sure that humans stay alive and we continue to be able to love people and love our God and all of the different things that go into making sure that we get to do the thing we're called to do. And every day is different.
Okay, beautiful. Well, so we're not going to get right into it just yet. We're going to do a little icebreaker. So,
oh my gosh, okay.
This is rapid fire. So
get to know the pastor.
Yes. So we're just gonna ask you this or that questions, or just whatever just first comes up. So I guess we'll go back and forth and just ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Are you ready? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it couldn't be more wild than a Sunday at the dwelling, right? So
yes, absolutely.
I feel like I got this. I can do it.
Okay. So texting or talking?
Oh,
too slow already.
Texting. Texting. Sorry, I think texting. Yeah, texting.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Old Testament or New Testament?
New Testament.
Curious. We're gonna come back to that. Flats or drums?
Oh, flats for sure.
Traditional or boneless?
Traditional.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Favorite season?
Fall.
Favorite Disney princess?
Oh,
got you on that one.
Mulan.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Let's get down to business.
Okay, so the soundtrack won. Won it?
Yeah. That's
wow.
I love it. I could sing the whole thing.
Okay, I'd like to hear a little bit of it.
Which song would you like me to start with?
Wow, I didn't really think you'd be.
Wow, we're getting a concert.
Yeah, you didn't anticipate such things.
Me personally, Christina Aguilera did her thing.
When will my reflection show who I am inside?
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Where's our?
Oh,
there it is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We had to clap for that.
I really do think that the "Let's Get Down to Business" is my shining song, though.
Do you feel like you relate to that moment in Mulan? When that song is about, or is it more from a musical production thing?
I think I just I like the montage that happens during it, right? Like this powerhouse woman who's taking on all the men in a man's world. So I mean the song is good, but really it's about this warrior just doing the damn thing.
I mean,
despite all odds. I think I actually relate more than I realized because
Yeah.
I'm saying this out loud.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Who knew?
I was about to say it sounds very familiar. It sounds
Yeah.
like you're talking about yourself in a sense.
Who knew?
So I
Okay.
think that's a great segue to
Mhm.
like, what is your story? And prior to the dwelling, who was Pastor Emily and what was that journey like?
Yeah, so prior to the dwelling, well, I thought I was going to be a teacher. That was what I went to school for, was to be a middle school, high school social studies teacher. So I knew that people have always been my thing, and pouring into people has always just been, kind of my life rhythm. But that's what I anticipated doing with my life. But I can actually like look back on my life and see these moments where I'm like, oh, like that's where the Lord intercepted. And part of that started for me when I was in undergrad. My first year of school, I grew up in the church. I went to youth group. I was on like our youth leadership stuff. I mean, all of that. But I loved church. So when I went to undergrad, my whole, first semester of school, I didn't go to church at all. And part of that was because you get out of the rhythms of like that, and your community changes. And, as an 18-year-old kid that's like doing their own thing for the first time, you don't want to do something without other people doing it with you. And my friend group was great, and it wasn't that they were anti-church by any means, but that church wasn't a part of what we did together. And I could like feel it in my bones, right? And so I didn't go at all that first semester. And then second semester rolled around. It was like probably February. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to church. Like, it was a Wednesday night. I went to Wartburg College, so there was a midweek Eucharist, like Wednesday night Eucharist. And I was like, I'm just going to walk across campus. I know I'll know people once I get there, but I just needed to go. So I walk across campus. I go, and there's a camp that's there recruiting for their summer staff from South Dakota. And I'd actually been to that camp the summer before as my final mission trip. It was experience with my youth group. And I just couldn't believe it that, like, here's this kid from Colorado in school in Iowa, and this camp from South Dakota is there on the one night that I, like, finally decide to, like, go. And they were recruited. It was an elementary age, middle school age camp, not really high school. And they were recruiting for summer staff. And I sat down with their program recruiter and had this awesome conversation, and they were like, we'd love to hire you for the summer, like on the spot.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, okay. So I went back to my dorm after church and called my mom, and I was like, I'm going to South Dakota for the summer. And she's like, I thought you were just going to church. And I said, I did. Look what happened. And so I ended up going to South Dakota for the summer, worked at that camp for multiple summers. But when I came back at the end of the summer back to school, I really, I just felt this like void, right? Because you're in an intentional community for 10 weeks and you're talking about Jesus. You're surrounded with people that are like building you up and affirming you. And I didn't have that when I came back to school. And I'd also taught myself how to play guitar that summer, just really out of necessity. And so I started looking for ways I could engage back on campus that fall. And there was a local church that was hiring, or they were looking for volunteers to help run their Sunday night youth group. And I was like, oh my gosh, and particularly music. And I was like, I can do that. Like, I have learned to play some guitar and I play the violin. And I was like, I can be a part of that. So I showed up to help with that. And I did that my sophomore and my junior year. And my senior year, they were looking for, their youth director had left, and they were looking for some extra help. And I was like, I can help a little bit more, like while y'all are in this interim time. And I would have volunteered, but they offered to pay me as their part-time youth minister. And I was like, my mom didn't raise a fool, so I'll take your money. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And so I started working part-time, which became a little bit more than part-time. And by the time, like probably April, had rolled around to that final year of school, they had offered me the position full-time after I graduated. And that kind of started my professional life in ministry. So decided not to be a teacher. I turned down a couple of teaching jobs that I'd been offered from my student teacher placements, which is really hard anyway to be a woman in social studies in middle school, high school. That's usually reserved for men who are coaches. Yeah. So I think I had to make a decision at that point, like which way was I going? And I don't know, like church just felt it was the right thing. And so I served that church in Iowa for 8 years total between that final year of school and then another 7 on top of that before I moved to North Carolina. And moved to North Carolina in 2013 to take a similar but expanded position at Augsburg Lutheran here in Winston as like youth and outreach. And through my outreach stuff, I started helping to run the shelter, and then eventually became the director of our shelter location at that for that site. And that's really how I started forming all the relationships that ultimately led to the dwelling. Just kind of that deep listening.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. But I can see the moments. Like I can see the moments where I showed up to go to church, and then camp, and then connectedness, and that's the gift I think of hindsight, is that you can see these moments that might feel somewhat insignificant as they're happening, and yet you're like, all right, Lord, I see like that divine pull of love that's like pulling you back into alignment, and you kind of get on the trajectory of being where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
So I've started to take it back so far, but all the way back to the 2000s there.
We love a good throwback.
Throwback. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so we know that the dwelling didn't just pop up overnight. That was a thing that took a lot of work and intentionality. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started this ministry and why you started this ministry and why it was you and not someone else?
I have no idea why it was me. So it really came out of the relationships and the conversations that we're building in our shelter. Ministries that look like this cannot happen without deep relationship and deep trust. Mm-hmm. And I had the luxury, which many mission developers do not have. So I recognize the privilege that I have in that. I had years of relationship and listening before we even said, let's do this thing. And it was because of that I felt the assurance and just the confidence that this was not about something I wanted to do, but it actually was what the Lord was orchestrating. Mm-hmm. And those conversations were, there are so many of them, but bottom line was that people were saying, I miss being in church. Mm-hmm. I once was a leader. I once was a part of this, but because of my circumstances, because of where I'm at now, because of broken relationship or whatever, I can't go back to the faith community I was once a part of. Right. And I actually think that says more about how messed up church is than it does about the people. Mm-hmm. Because people, I don't care who you are, we're messy and we're broken, period. Like that's it. Yeah. And if church isn't for broken, then I don't know what the hell church is. So, but that's what I just kept hearing is people saying, I miss church. I want to be in church. I want to be a leader in church. And I can't do that in the places I used to. Mm. And I can't do it in the places that are in my immediate circle, right? Mm-hmm. And, we have so many downtown churches here in Winston that are are great. They are good congregations. They are doing good ministry. They are doing good community. And also, if someone who looks unhoused, someone who looks like they might be in some sort of substance use or working through mental illness, if they walk into one of those good congregations, and this is, I don't mean this to be critical, someone is going to follow them to the bathroom. Someone is going to make sure that they're not finding their way down a corridor in an area they're not supposed to be in, even though someone who is a member of that congregation could be in that corridor. And our folks, they feel that. They see it. They sense the eyes on them. They know that there is more attention, I guess, being paid to them. And so I just kept hearing it. I want to be in church, but I can't walk into that church. I'm not comfortable there. They don't trust me there. Whatever it is. And so people were asking for it. And I got to hear that. And so then I just started paying attention a little bit more. And part of my whole journey towards ordination as well was that I knew, and I had known for a long time, that the Lord had put something on my life that I was supposed to be leading from. And I couldn't reconcile what that looked like for me in like a traditional way.
Yeah.
And that is not to say that traditional didn't form me and love me, because it did. Like, I am who I am, and I know Jesus, and I know community, and I have the foundation that I do because the traditional church loved me so well.
Yeah.
So it's not to dismiss that, but I just couldn't figure out how I fit in the rhythm of traditional, right? And so, like, that was my hang up. And I was at seminary, before I had even like fully like dove into this thing. I was just like tiptoeing around the edges of the pool. And our dean of kind of vocation and student affairs stuff, she pulled me into her office and was like, "What is your hang up?" And I was like, I understand. I know I'm difficult here. And she's like, she's like, "What's the problem?" And I said, "I just don't think I can do it like everybody else does it."
Yeah.
And she said, "Emily, the church needs you not to do it like everybody else." And I was like, "Well, why the hell didn't somebody say that to me earlier?" And I was like, "I think I'm supposed to be a pastor." And she said, "Yeah, there's a lot of people that have been waiting a really long time for you to say that." And I was like, okay, I think that's it. And as soon as I said it out loud, it was like I didn't realize I had not been deeply breathing. And like once I said it, I was like, oh. So like that's what a full breath feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And so I just kept going. And eventually, like, then all of these conversations and these relationships kept going as well. And when we got to the fall of 2019, I was graduating in the spring of 20, so I knew it was, we had to be figuring out what that was going to look like, and started having conversations with our synod and our director of mission. And it's like, there's a church here, and I think this is what I've been formed to do. And the people are asking for it. And the synod said no.
How many times?
7. So many times. And it wasn't because they were like, absolutely not, this is a terrible idea. So that was not it. But it was more the like, nothing about what you're asking to do makes sense. Yeah. And I get that. And part of their caution in it, and I really respect this, deeply respect this, was that they were like, we're not going to start a church that is intentionally gathering people that have some marginalized experiences, run out the funding from the church-wide level, and then not have a plan for sustainability on the back end. Yeah. Because that just does more church trauma to people who already are living in trauma and already have church junk.
That's wise.
Right. And so they weren't ready to say yes until they could say yes, knowing that they were in on it.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that no came at like no 5. So I think like the first 4 were like, you're crazy, sit your ass down. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, there's a church. And I think they were like, maybe. And I was like, we can work with a maybe. And then we did. And I think what really sealed the deal was when we envisioned and then we lived out that the dwelling is a partnership, that it wasn't just the Lutherans, like the Moravians are in on this too. Because we're better when we're in community and we're doing it together.
Ain't that the truth?
So,
Yeah. And then just real quickly, when you say, what was that? So do you feel like that came as a more seamless partnership because of your work in the community and the connect? Like, did you already have the connections with the Moravian?
Yeah. The Moravians, they've been really, really good partners in homeless ministry outreach for a long time. And that's in big part to a local pastor named Russ May. And he was really the one who spearheaded and did all of the organizing around these winter overflow shelters. So because of the foundation that he had laid with the shelters, I think it was an easy yes for the Moravians because of the investment that he had already done, not on our behalf, but he just had laid such groundwork for doing this kind of partnered ecumenical work with this specific community. So I owe a lot to Russ, and he was a big advocate for the dwelling from the beginning.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, there is a certain story that I definitely want to get into after this little break that we have. So I would love for you to, I think it's really beautiful, a story that you share about how the community kind of prophesized the future of the dwelling and the movement of the buildings and things like that. But then also getting to, with the community that we work with, there's a lot of misconceptions. So, I would love to kind of go into that.
Sounds good.
Once we come back from our break. Alrighty, welcome back. Thank you guys for sticking around for our little break. This is Dwelling Beyond, a Dwelling production podcast. And this is our first episode, and we have the pleasure of having Pastor Emily.
Pastor.
That's right. The Pastor Emily. Forgot. So we're just going to get right back into it. And I would love for you to speak on what the journey has been finding different locations for the community and kind of where you got started and how that was kind of prophesized into fruition by the community.
Yeah. So, I mean, really the dwelling started in the shelter. I mean, that was really like the first place where we started to gather, and not in any organized kind of way, but like at Christmas time, like we had like a Moravian candle tea, and during Lent, like I would come down and we would do ashes. I mean, so there was like some of those like spiritual practice things that started to happen where there was like interest that was piqued. And then officially we began as the dwelling in February of 2020. And we all know the dumpster fire that ensued from there. So, I mean, it just looked so different at the beginning just because out of necessity, it couldn't look like anything that was familiar. And so it was a lot of just in parking lots and under tents and around the shower trailer. But I think the thing about that was the ways that we like did community when community was like off limits, right? Because of the pandemic, communicated something to our folks that like we were there and not when it's convenient or easy. And so I think there was like a level of trust that that started at that point. But we were in a building that was actually the primary meeting space for one of our partner nonprofits, and they gifted us space to exist with them and alongside them, which was a huge gift. And so we shared a building with them and really tried to be good partners alongside of them and just kind of rounding out care for our community. But we outgrew that space really quickly. And what's funny about it, when we renovated and kind of got that space ready, and I was a big part of making that happen. But when I remember like walking around our old building and being like, this is huge. There's no way we'll ever fill this. And then we did.
How many people would you say that old space was holding?
I mean, it felt good and full at like 50. And then when we like started hitting 100 every week, it was like there was no room to move. Like you were shoulder to shoulder with folks. So then we moved outside and we did, until it was like too cold blazing heat, we were outside and we'd pop up tents every single week. And so like the blazing heat of summer, like the only time we were in that building then was when it was like the shelter was open because it was so cold. And then we were just like every day, like check in. Is it warm enough to be out? No. Is it warm enough yet? Yes. Is it just warm enough? Let's try it, and because it was just so much to have people inside. And we had to get really creative about using other hallways to be where we served the food. I mean, it was like Jenga trying to make it all work. But we did. And I think it grew at the pace it needed to grow. But I remember like vividly, actually, one of our community members, he was there on a Sunday, and one of the spaces overlooked, like there was a window, and you could see out the window to the building that we are in now. And he like pulled me in there, and this is as we're grown and we can't fit in there. And he pulls me in the room and he said, "Pastor," and he points out the window at this other building, and he says, "That's our church." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, I had a vision about it. I said, "Okay." And he said, "That's our church. I was walking up the stairs to that church, and I know it's your church because yours is the only church I'm going to go to." And he said, "That's going to be our church."
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And he's just like he's a prophet anyway. So, he draws pictures that are just like really prophetic. And there's just the things that he has experienced in his life, the things that he has done, there is absolutely no way that man is not more deeply connected to the Lord. So like if he speaks, I'm gonna listen. and we did.
And when he said that, because even when I heard that story, I was like, woo.
Yeah.
But in that time, because sometimes, even if it's people that we know to be more connected, sometimes, and especially in the environment, you kind of just like, oh, yeah, right. Like you kind of laugh it off. So in that moment, or was that something that you had already considered, or did you kind of like joke? Like, did you kind of like laugh it off, or did you really feel it in that moment?
So what's funny about that is that I pass our building, or I used to, the way that I would come to work from where I lived previously, and I would pass it. And so the dwelling started in 2020, and I would say within the first 3 months of that, I remember passing our building. And I called the pastor over at Augsburg, because Augsburg owns our building. And I actually called him only a handful of months into the dwelling and said, "Hey, I want your building. And he's like, why don't you get yours started first? Like, and I was like, no, I get that. Like, I'm not saying yet. But at some point, like, I want your building. We need your building. And he was like, okay, well, we can come back to this. And then I kind of like tabled it for a while because it was COVID world. And I mean, there wasn't a necessity for it yet. But then when William came back and was like, that's our building, I was like, oh, yeah. So I said that a year and a half ago, too.
Yeah,
and
so that was like a sign.
yeah, just that kind of affirmation. And then it was not long after that we really did start having all of the conversations that were moving us towards that next phase of our life.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. There was another guy, Johnny, who also just unprovoked sent me a Facebook message at one point that was like, the Lord wanted me to tell you that we're going to move, but we're not moving far. It's just across the street. So like we've actually had a couple of people that have been like, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some spirit stuff.
It is spirit stuff. And I think that like, I actually think we get a front row seat at the inbreaking of the kingdom at the dwelling. And I think part of that is because all of the other stuff is stripped away, right? All of the pretense, all of the distraction, it's not there because our community just doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And because of that, like we get to see the Spirit at work in ways that I don't know if other communities of faith get to.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to something I wanted to ask about. You were talking about traditional church, and obviously the dwelling is not a traditional church
No,
in
it's
almost
not.
every way. And if listeners, if you've been to worship at the dwelling, you also know, or if you've seen us on Facebook, that it's a little bit wild. But tell us more about how it's not traditional. Like what are the things that make the dwelling church still, but also what are the things that are different, that are unique maybe?
I mean, I think the thing that makes the dwelling church, I mean, there are people gathering to praise a living God. That's it. Like, that is church. It is a place where you can drag all of your messiness, all of your cracked pieces, all of your complexities, and there is a place where it belongs. And we bring it all. We set it at the altar, and we worship a God that's like, you are freakingly beautifully made, right? And like that is what makes it church. There is a place for God's people to gather to worship a living God. And it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Like that is what makes it church. And then you can step it out a little bit. And if you like good old Lutherans were like the central things, we have the central things. Our worship includes the central things. We welcome, we confess our sins, we absolve each other of them, we hear the word proclaimed, we pray together, we break bread together, and then we send each other back out into the world. So like liturgically, if you look at our parts of worship, they're all there. All of them. They are all there. There is nothing that is happening at the dwelling that is not happening across the street or around the country in other Protestant worshiping spaces. It's all there. It just roots itself in context differently.
Yeah.
And the words that we use, I think because they're not so heady and they're not so scripted, they sink into the soul differently. And they take root differently. And so I think that's part of what makes us different is that like just embedded into who we are is this acknowledgement of our humanity first and the scripture and the gathered community. Then like, I don't know, almost hugs humanity. Right. But it's all there.
Yeah, I mean, even down to like the design of the space. I remember when I first visited, I was like, whoa, there's no pews.
Yep.
So, I think it's a lot of intentionality that went into, really trying to maintain the foundation, but also understand the context and the complexity of the community and what, like the decision to have like couches and chairs instead of like pews and more of a open space pulpit, I guess you could say, versus like, with all the things and all the statues and all the cups and drinks and, like there still is space for that.
Yeah.
But, how you said earlier, there's really no, like if someone in the community wants to come up, what is the, I guess, respected pulpit and like sit down, they can come up and sit down. Where in like other churches, kind of like, why are you in, whose kid is that? Like, you know what I mean?
No.
And so, I think also just the atmosphere itself and how it was created to welcome, because again, it's not just for the marginalized. It's like an accompaniment with.
Yep.
And I think because, it's not just, it's people who, I don't want to say aren't marginalized, but like you have people who choose to come to church there who can go other places.
Yeah,
or who
absolutely.
Would or who came from other places, right? And was looking for something, came to the dwelling once and never left. Yep. So I think it's a beautiful space. And also with that, I feel like, maybe there is a lot of like misconceptions around what the dwelling is from, because also like you do way more stuff outside of Sundays, right? So what do you feel like are misconceptions that you've heard? I think like I spoke on, one of the biggest ones would be it's all just marginalized people.
Right.
It's the homeless church.
Yeah. It's the addicts church.
So what would you say are, now that we have you here, what are a few misconceptions, about the dwelling that you would like to kind of clear up?
I mean, I think that's the biggest one. And I think that's locally, but I also think that's at a church level as well. That people are like, oh, like that's the church that gathers the homeless. Yep. It's also the church that gathers a bunch of young adults and a lot of creatives and, recovering Catholics and like old accountants and, single
Retired
moms, retired pastors. Yes, like our intentionality at the start was to make sure that there was a community for folks that are often told that they don't belong. Like that is true, 100%. And it has continued to evolve and grow. But I think actually I am like in my bones certain that when you actually start on the outside, you start on the margins, it includes everybody.
Yeah.
So like the church should start on the outer ring, because if you start on the outer ring, then everybody's in.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually the theology of the cross lived out. That like if Jesus died on the cross and that was the most pitiful, awful way to die, then nobody can say that they will die a death worse than Jesus. That's it. Start at the outs, and then everything's included from there. And so, I mean, I think that's just what we continue to see being like lived out at the dwelling. And so that's the misconception. Like that's the church for the homeless. That's the church for the addicts. That's the church for the dealers. That's just real. And yep, that's true. But it's also the church for everybody. And yeah, so I think that's our biggest one. But then I also think like there are folks that look at some of our other activities, our shower trailer, our feasting ministry, our service learning that we do in partnership with Spark, right? And they like, it's easy to look and be like, oh, that's an agency, right? There's a service that's being provided. True, there is. That is an act of service. But all of our service is rooted actually in sacramental theology, like showers, because showers like call us back to center, and our baptisms, right? Feasting, because that's what we do at the table. And, you know, in all of our service learning stuff, it's all rooted in relationship and equity and justice. And so it's, yes, we have direct service stuff, but it's all because of who we are as a people of faith first.
Wow. Thank you. So the podcast is titled Dwelling Beyond. So I'll let Brittany take it from here.
Yeah. What does that mean to you? What are you dwelling beyond these days?
My first gut is to say that we're dwelling beyond the no.
No, as in
N-O.
N-O. Okay.
I like that.
Because we were told no so many times, but God was like, nope, come on, let's go. And so I think we started with a no, but we did not end with a no. We're not even close to an end. I think we're just getting started. But I think that no for me also includes logic. Like, I think we are dwelling beyond logic, because nothing about this church makes sense at all. And at the same time, everything about this church makes sense.
Right.
But when you think about the logical things and like the operational side of church, like, nope, it's like, it ain't here. I mean, even just the financial side of stuff, traditional congregations pass an offering plate to sustain their ministry, and we have never and will never pass an offering plate. Like, because the minute we do, then there's shame for people who have nothing to put in it. And I refuse to introduce more shame into the lives of our community. So we won't do it. And yesterday, one of our community members handed me an envelope with $120 in it, because that's her 10% of her disability check.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So, like, nothing makes sense, and it all makes sense at the same time. So yeah, I think it's dwelling beyond the no and trusting that beyond the no is where God is gonna like get super busy. God's faithful in it.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful. Well, I mean, is there anything else that you feel called to share, or you want to touch on, or you want to say?
I think that the dwelling has so much to teach the world and the church. And I want to just continue to be a place and maintain a posture of openness where we can be teachers. And not because our leadership is teachers, but because our people are the teachers. And I think we do that really well. And I just want more people to be able to learn from our teachers, because they're amazing.
Well, sounds like it's time to get down to business.
It's always business. Always business time.
Let's get down to business.
To defeat the Huns. Yep.
Well,
Full circle.
yes.
Nice. I like that.
Again, I do think you embody the character more than you think.
I think I need to go watch Mulan again.
Yeah. And I think, it was just very interesting how things come together, because I think that was a perfect example of, like, when you were explaining it, it was just kind of like, oh, seems like we already got the interview started.
Yeah, there it is.
I love it.
Well, thank you to the Pastor Emily for being on our show today.
Thank you to you both for doing this. I'm excited for this episode, but all the other ones too.
Yeah. And thank you to
Yeah. Pastor Emily.
Pastor Emily. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. This was our first episode of the Dwelling Beyond podcast. We're excited to come back with more special guests and tell you more fun and crazy stories from our little community here in Winston-Salem.
Amen.
Amen. And we'll see you on the next episode. Follow us on the Dwelling WS on all platforms. Well, so Facebook and Instagram.
Maybe we'll get on Threads soon.
Yes,
Ooh.
Threads.
Yeah,
All
TikTok.
the
real
good
hip.
things.
Get the-
All the good things.
Get the TikTok going.
Yes, the TikTok is coming soon.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.